All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our friction finding section. My name is KK McCaslin, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the Director of Programs and Community Initiatives here at the Foundation. And as a Livestrong staff member, it is my goal to find practical solutions to everyday cancer problems. So the goal of today's session is to discuss emerging friction points in cancer care and quality of life, and surface ideas for how to solve those problems. So, to wake us up after lunch, our first exercise is going to be, I want everyone here to give me what they think of when they hear friction. How do you define friction? So you're welcome to come off mute, or you're welcome to share in the chat. But please go ahead. We only have so much time today, so we're ready to go. Anything that makes life harder. Suzanne, static. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think of a car engine with not enough oil in it for whatever reason.
Great. I saw conflict as well, and a bump along the road. These are all great answers, and I completely agree with all of you. So when I think of friction, I think of it as a feeling. I think of it as, like a negative tension that's in the room. It makes me uncomfortable, and it's generally something that I want to get rid of. So the actual definitions of friction are the clashing between two persons of opposed views, or the resistance that one object encounters when moving over another. And I think we could all agree that those have applied in everyday life, but also likely in a cancer journey. So if you're still feeling a little lost, I pulled a few examples of how friction has been defined in different spaces. So first, friction is like the color in the fruit bowl. It is made up of several different things. So what this means to me is it's probably more than one thing that is making you feel friction. So to change friction, we need to identify and understand each different component of the problem and recognize that there are multiple things leading up to that. So the other one we heard that you referenced, Mark, is the famous Perot quote, "All machines have their friction." And if you want a machine to work smoothly, then you have to oil its moving parts. So it takes work to overcome friction. I love that you're laughing, Mark. So good. And the last example that I have, and I think we can all relate to this, whether you got an A+ in that friction unit in your physics class or not, friction is like bills. No matter how hard you try, you can't avoid them. And we know that this is true in cancer, it's true in life. But this is really our driving principle for today. Friction can be reduced, but not eliminated. So it's always going to be there. There's always going to be little things that add up to big things. But if we really work at those little things, we can help reduce friction. So how does this relate to cancer care? So as we heard from those definitions, I really think of friction as that push and pull. You're having lots of conversations along the way. You're asking lots of questions and you're getting lots of answers, but those things may not be in alignment. So one thing that comes to mind would be what my doctor wants to do versus what I want to do. Another scenario may be my medical needs bumping up against my practical needs. If you're a caregiver, taking care of others versus taking care of me, we have to make sure we take care of ourselves too, right? Where do we create time and space for that? Next, everything going on in my treatment, and then my life outside of treatment, or vice versa, everything going on in the hospital and everything taking place outside of the hospital. Next, processing my emotions versus actually talking about my emotions. They keep coming up, and how do we address them? And then the big one, me before cancer versus me after cancer. And what are my goals along the way? So again, lots of questions and lots of information, and we have to make decisions to navigate the journey all the time and overcome friction along the way. So my question to you all is, where do you feel the friction? So you can use this phrase to answer the question. I felt the friction when, or if anyone could share in their work or in their personal experiences, what was a time when you felt friction or you felt you were bumping up against something, and you maybe had to work a little harder to get that problem resolved? And feel free to come off mute or to share in the chat.
I'd like to share. Whoop, go ahead, Mark.
No, you have it, Scott.
I was going to say I wanted to share one that had come in this morning through a friend, an ovarian cancer patient who's been through several rounds of chemotherapy and is on her second clinical trial. It's just an experience that I haven't had personally and haven't thought about in this way, but I'll just read her quote directly. There needs to be more oversight on how clinical trials interface with patients. Thus far, my experience in my second trial is that you are left without solid support, treated like a guinea pig, and left with a feeling that the trial results may be more important than your well-being. You often hear about clinical trials being even better for patients. They get special support, and she's having a very different experience where the needs of the trial and the needs of her as someone who's suffering are not quite, there's friction.
Yeah, so maybe she's being pushed along and not getting those answers she wants, or maybe the human aspect or the person-centered aspect is missing.
Right.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, Mark, and then John will let you go too.
So I'll just add that, so we work predominantly with children, pediatrics with cancer, and what a kid wants versus what their parents might want for them or their caregivers might want for them can be really incongruous and can get consistently so. So I think that's a space of friction often that we navigate.
Yeah, and it could be someone with cancer, or maybe it's the person without cancer where you're feeling that friction. And that we all know that nucleus grows and grows, right? There's the parent and child, there's the grandparents, there's the friends, there's the 5 million providers you're talking to along the way. So lots of opportunities and sources for friction. John, would you like to share?
Yeah, I guess I had not ever actually thought of it as friction, but for me, it's kind of just wondering what the full picture is. In talking to the doctors, and they say, well, this is happening, but, and we can do this, or there's this possibility for treatment, but you never, or I can't say never, I've gotten to the point where I can figure out how to talk to the doctors and ask the questions and get a more full idea of what everything is happening, everything that's going on. So, but it took a while. It took several years, in fact, to get to the point where I actually know how to ask all the questions and get a better picture.
Yeah, and I'd love to revisit that timeline of how it took lots of effort to get there when we get to a little later in the presentation. Suzanne, did you have a friction point you wanted to mention?
My friction point was the, at Livestrong, right? We give survivors and caregivers a lot of information. And is that too much, right? Almost to John's point, like, here, we're going to give you everything we can think of that we think you might need. And then are we real? I mean, I think we're certainly trying, right? But is the friction what they think they need, or is it what they really need? Is there too much information, not enough information? Where's that healthy balance?
Yeah, so how can we get more personalized and direct in those that we serve?
Yeah.
Do Emily or Simon have any friction points that they've recognized?
I can kind of go off what Suzanne said. A friction point that we recognized were on the support side of our Cancer Institute. And again, like, when do you give those support services? Is it too much information with the new patient folder? Is it too late if we wait too long? So just kind of figuring out when to offer those services when they're digesting all this information.
Yeah, so what is the sweet spot for information? And I think it's different for each journey depending on your unique needs, like Suzanne mentioned. Simon, what are some friction points you've seen in your work?
Well, I mean, we work with adolescents and young adults, and principally our work is with hospitals to try and develop specialist programs around that particular age group. and facilities because they don't fit into pediatric or adult care, because the average age is 6 for pediatrics and the average age is 60 for adults. And our friction is really big friction with the system itself. The system itself does not accommodate young people well. So there are many aspects of that that are also friction at an individual level for those young people. But from our perspective, it's the systems are very difficult to change, and when they're not meeting patient need, like the person who was just talking about clinical trials that seem more important to the outcome of the trial than they do the experience of the patient. It's a similar kind of scenario, I think, for what we're having to deal with. We're trying to get a really siloed system to change the way it's been working for years and do something different.
Yeah, and I would say the AYA population definitely has additional friction points, unique needs, and extra things to overcome. But what's interesting about what you all said is you didn't just stop, right? You kept moving. You found solutions and you moved forward, even though it may have not felt quite right. But that's how cancer is, right? We keep moving forward. We keep finding solutions. But everything we just talked about is really what we call gaps here at Livestrong. So next, in the spirit of finding balance, I would love to talk about what went smoothly. So maybe you felt relief, or maybe you just recognized that you had expert care in this scenario. So what were some things that went really well, or things that you see working well in your treatment, or in your past experiences, or in your place of work?
Well, generally, all of the medical things went reasonably well. All of the issues were more around, human compassion and how things were communicated and what you needed to know when, and less about the actual treatment.
Yeah, we talked about that in the mental health session this morning, how we need to create time and space for that humanizing experience and the human relation aspect of anything really that you do in life. But that would really help these things feel less transactional and more progressive. Anything else that someone would like to acknowledge went really well in their cancer care, or that you think your organization does really well? Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying just to allow others to jump in here. So excuse me. Those moments, so again, we work primarily with children and adolescents, teens along that frame. And those moments where they get to choose how they engage, and I think makes a really big difference. And you can see the effect of them being empowered to make a choice when they are surrounded by so much limitation to making those choices. And so when those moments come up, it's really powerful.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Empowering patients. Go ahead, John.
I think the thing that went smoothly for me was when I finally got the courage to start asking the right questions. And and it was in me that's what it took. But then when I had for instance, had a nutritionist that was finally assigned to me, and the first thing she said was that you're going to hear all kinds of things. You're going to hear people, it's on Facebook, and you're going to find all kinds of YouTube videos about the things you should be eating and things you shouldn't be eating. And she said, don't listen to any of that. Talk to me. And and it was that was really encouraging, because there's all kinds of information out there, and having somebody that I could go to. But then by that time I had gotten the courage to start asking real good questions, and so I was able to ask her and ask the doctors. And once I got to that point, then things smoothed out considerably.
Yeah, I feel like we would all love that to happen without all this extra effort being necessary to get there. So how can we get us, I don't know if it's the patient or the provider, I think it depends on the scenario, but how can we cut through the noise, and get to the information we really want? I also love that Mark mentioned person-centered care and really listening to the people. And yeah, there's good stuff going on too. So now that we've talked about the lows and the highs, my last part is, how can we grease the wheels? So like we said, we want to expedite the good and try to cut through that friction. So how can we reduce friction? Does anyone have any ideas for how we can remove barriers, big or small, to have more successful cancer conversations, treatments, opportunities, or anything like that? Is there anything that comes to mind? And we could certainly share some examples we've learned from Livestrong, over the years. And Scott wanted to mention that being changed to a different facility really made a difference for him. So that's good too. So when I think about greasing the wheels, and doing things better, I do think it has a lot to do with listening to the person with cancer. I think of, our Livestrong survivorship programs. I think of how we heard that people wanted a way to get back on their feet in cancer treatment, so then we started talking to a lot of people, and we eventually figured out that Livestrong at the YMCA was the way to do that. Or, we offer our fertility program, and we know that it's a very difficult situation to be in, but we want to be there to offer that program between diagnosis and treatment, which we all know is a very short window. But can anyone think of ways that you want to grease the wheels, or what is something you really want to change, or something you have changed, at your organization that we can all learn from?
I can say something. I think one of the things that we have to do more of, and I think organizations like Livestrong do very well, is to understand cancer in the context of people's lives. In the health system, it tends to be that it's all about, everything is about the disease. And then there are good support systems around that. Sometimes in some organizations, they do very well. But I think to understand cancer as a disease and what it affects people in their lives in that context is really what's important for me, and to actually find the things that are going to grease their wheels, if you like, in their journey. That's, I think about a good example for young people, I find, is that, let's say teens, for example, are old enough to know what's happening to them, but not necessarily mature enough sometimes to deal with the consequences of that. And they may, for example, not share their innermost fears with their parents because they're mature enough to understand what the impact of their distress is on their families. And so that's a very unique, well, it's not unique to young people, but it's something that that is a real priority to deal with them. And obviously we want to deal with the cancer, and we want to deal with the effects of cancer, but that's a huge burden for a young person to deal with. And sometimes there isn't the room or the space to look at those types of issues that people are dealing with. And I think contextualizing cancer and not having it as the only thing we talk about, but talk about holistically all the things that the impact of that cancer diagnosis is having on them and the people around them, will help us do better, as I say, to grease their wheels and reduce their friction. If we look outside of the cancer more than we do now.
I love that. I love really looking into where these people are right now and kind of taking cancer out of the picture for a few minutes, and then deciding what one thing in the cancer journey am I going to try to address. I feel like sometimes we have so much on our plate, which is unavoidable with a diagnosis, but addressing the little things can, again, reduce friction and create a bigger change. And I see Nadia. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and we're also different. Everybody is so different, you know, and you know, all the cancers, you know, might be the same, but the way that way we respond to them and the way we respond to the diagnosis, the way we respond to the treatment is all different, and we all have a different environment, you know, a social environment as well as a real environment around us, and we have to look closely at what those impacts are. You know, we know the choices that people make. You know, people may choose not to go to the best center because actually childcare is their most important thing and they want to be close to their kids. You know, they're real decisions that people can take, but we need to make that, we need to empower people to be able to find their own pathway through this trauma. And I feel that's a responsibility of all of us.
Well, I can't say it better than that. So thank you so much, Simon, for wrapping this all up. But really, this was just meant to be a mini session to get your brain going, to get you ready for the afternoon. So thank you all for taking time with me today to find friction and ways to reduce it. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. But I do have to let you all go so you can go to your next session. But again, thanks for helping us find friction. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your afternoon with Livestrong.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.